Hey Wargamers, a lot of you have been asking me about Pathfinders in 8th edition, how they work, what are their strengths and weaknesses, everything like that. So let's do it. Let's talk about Pathfinders. And before we do, I just want to say thanks for watching. If you like this video, if you like my other videos, go ahead, hit the like button and the subscribe button. That way you don't miss any of my upcoming battle reports, unit reviews like this one, or 8th edition hobby videos. Alright, so let's get to it. I have Index Xenos 2 here, and let's just start with some of the basics about Pathfinders. Primarily, they're going to be a Markerlight base for your army. That's really what you're going to use them for. But now more than ever, you have the option of using special weapons with Pathfinder teams, meaning ion rifles or rail rifles. In the past, that was totally out of the question. Today, it's not a for sure thing. It's not 100% the best option all the time, but it's more viable now than it has been in the past. And we'll get to why that is and what types of situations you might want to be able to field those options in a moment. But before we do, let's start with the profile here. Well, standard Pathfinders have movement of 7, so they're actually a bit faster than a standard Fire Warrior. They have weapon skill of 5 up, which is normal, a ballistic skill of 4 up, which is also normal, strength 3, toughness 3, normal, 1 wound, 1 attack, 2 if you're the Shazui, leadership 6 or 7, and then 5 up save. So pretty similar to how they were, but with that noticeable boost in mobility. Granted, it's only an inch, but we're playing a game of inches, so 7 inches is not bad. So we can definitely go with that. The unit starts with 5 Pathfinders. You can take up to 10. And we'll talk a little bit more about how many Pathfinders is really appropriate based on your weapon selection here. So, and that's really where the big question about Pathfinders comes into play, is which weapons do you want to take. Their standard loadout is a pulse carbine and a Markerlight, with photon grenades of course, but I think that this standard loadout is still going to be your default choice. It's still going to be primarily what most people are using on their Pathfinders, is a carbine Markerlight setup. And the reason for that is that Markerlights on Pathfinders are now a lot better option compared to some other sources of Markerlights, including Markerlight drones. Changes to how the drone controller works, and also the changes to moving and shooting heavy weapons, which Markerlights are, make Pathfinders a lot more attractive. Basically, Markerlight drones are good. They're still a fairly good source of Markerlights. They hit on 5s, which is not desirable, but they're faster than Pathfinders and more durable. They also have the Savior Protocols option, which allows them to step in and take wounds off of nearby infantry or battle suits, which Pathfinders can't do. So for that reason, Markerlights are not a terrible thing to get from Marker drones, but still, you're going to want to primarily use Pathfinders for your Markerlights because they're more reliable. They have that higher ballistic skill, and that's important in a unit that really facilitates the success of the rest of your army. Markerlights now are more important than ever just because of the way that they work. They're stackable. Basically, at 1 Markerlight, you get to reroll 1s. At 2 Markerlights, you get access to using the ballistic skill of a unit firing a Seeker or Destroyer missile. At 3, you get to advance and shoot. At 4, you ignore cover. And at 5, you get +1 ballistic skill. So really, if you want to get the most bang for your buck out of your army as a whole, you want to get 5 Markerlights on an army or on a unit that you're looking to take out, fire your whole army at it, and it's going to go a lot better than if you only had 1 Markerlight or no Markerlights at all. It's not this pick and choose the effect thing that we used to have, that we're used to. It's a lot more difficult to get the full benefit of Markerlights, and you're not necessarily going to be able to use all the benefits that you get on a single unit. Like if you get 2 Markerlights on something and you don't have any Seeker missiles, too bad, you might as well have just stuck with 1. So the big dynamic here is really getting between 1 and 4 or 5 Markerlights. And so having a reliable source of Markerlights is really important. And that's why Pathfinders are a good option. The changes in Overwatch also make carbines a better option? Previously in 7th edition and 6th edition, when you fired Overwatch, you would always fire your Markerlights because they would give you an opportunity to increase the fire, either your nearby unit's ballistic skill to the point where they're no longer hitting on 6s. Well, you can't do that anymore. It's always going to hit on a 6, so the best you're going to be able to do is reroll 1s using Markerlights, which is the benefit of just one Markerlight hit. And that's fine, but really I think in most cases I would rather just have more shots as granted by the carbine. So having carbines is now a good thing too. It actually gives the carbine on the Pathfinder a better use than it did previously. Markerlights aren't this end-all be-all of your army, and so the carbine actually comes into play more often. So for those two reasons, the need for reliable Markerlights and the increased utility of a carbine in Overwatch make me lean towards the standard Markerlight carbine loadout as being your fundamental, basic, 95% of the time option on Pathfinders. But there are those other 5% of the time that you're going to want to look at the special weapon options. And Pathfinders have two. They have the ion rifle and the rail rifle. Both of these are actually very good options in terms of damage output per point invested. Now, of course, we're talking about a points system here. If you're using power level or no, if you're doing open play, then this doesn't really matter. Just, do what you want. But in terms of a point system, ion and rail rifles are actually pretty good for the points that you pay for them. They can put out a lot of damage relative to crisis suits or relative to fire warriors. They're a lot more points efficient. However, there's a big issue with them, and that is that they're still on Pathfinders. Pathfinders have that 5-up save, they're toughness 3 with 1 wound, and they're just so easy to wipe off the board. And so in some ways it's kind of nice that Pathfinders only have Markerlights and carbines, because that makes them a little bit less of a threat. Sometimes you can kind of sneak them by your opponent, and your opponent will target scarier looking things up front first, as opposed to taking out your Pathfinders. But once you give the Pathfinders these special weapons, it makes them more of a target, and so that not only loses your offensive capability, but also loses your support capabilities from your Markerlights, because your units can have between 5 and 10 Pathfinders, but only 3 of those Pathfinders can take those special weapons. So you're always going to have some Markerlights in the unit, and that's good and bad, because in some ways having the Markerlights mixed in with the special units is nice, because it allows Markerlights to benefit those special weapons in a way that if you didn't have any Markerlights at all, you would kind of be in a bad position, especially with the ion rifle. The ion rifle has the option to supercharge or overcharge, and if you roll a 1 to hit while firing it in that supercharged state, you suffer a mortal wound, and there's nothing you can do about it. So there's a 12-point model that is just gone right off the bat because you rolled a 1. But if you get a Markerlight hit on there, you can actually re-roll that 1, avoid that mortal wound, and save your Pathfinder. But like I said, it's also a detriment, because if someone wants to get rid of that ion rifle, they're going to be shooting at your Pathfinder unit and also kill your Markerlights. So having this separation of units in terms of things that are support units and things that are offensive units is beneficial in a lot of situations, because it forces your opponent to only take out one of those two instead of taking out both in the same time. So that's kind of the crux of my argument against special weapons in Pathfinders, is that they are glass cannons and they are super fragile. It's just not worth the points, in my opinion, most of the time, to put the points into special weapons in Pathfinders, because they're so wimpy, they're so squishy that they're easy to wipe away, and those are points that you can't get back. So for the points you pay, they can do a lot of damage, but they're not going to stick around long enough to really do that damage. And so that's kind of the big issue there. If you're playing in an environment where you can sneak your Pathfinders around and have them survive and have those special weapons on them, then go for it. But if you're not, if you're in a position where that's just not possible, which I think is most of the time, then I would tend to stay away from the special weapons on Pathfinders. Right, so that's the weapons. Those are the two main philosophies that we have. Drones, you have a couple options. Of course, you can go with marker drones, gun drones, shield drones. Shield drones, there's absolutely no reason to ever take shield drones with Pathfinders, especially once we got this FAQ that says shield drones are basically useless, so skip shield drones. Gun drones, they're fine. Gun drones are really points efficient in this edition. They put out a fair amount of damage, but they are short range. Your Pathfinders are typically going to want to stay further away from the opponent. So Markerlight drones are a fairly good option if you want to get drones into your army without buying a drone unit. That said, Markerlight drones with Pathfinder unit, not necessary at all. So, do it if you have a few extra points or you want more drones, but you don't need to. Then we get three other special options that Pathfinders have access to that no one else does. One is the recon drone. This allows Pathfinder units nearby to ignore cover for a target enemy, and that's fine. That's good. That's actually really good. But if you're just using your Pathfinders for Markerlights, it doesn't matter. So only consider bringing a recon drone if you're bringing ion rifles. If you're bringing rail rifles, you have -4 AP anyway, and that's going to take care of most things anyway. So you really only need to worry about the cover modifier with ion rifles. So if you bring ion rifles, bring the recon drone. Sure. The pulse accelerator drone adds a few inches to the range of pulse weapons, or more specifically pistols, carbines, and rifles, not blasters notably. And so this is a fine option if you are going to be embedding your Pathfinders alongside your Fire Warriors, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. Then the third option is a grav inhibitor drone. Don't even bother with it. It's not going to make a difference. You're probably going to die either way. So I wouldn't worry about it. A final option that you have with Pathfinders, just like any Tau Sept infantry, is to take a Devilfish. In the past, Devilfish and Pathfinders were pretty closely linked. At some points, they were required to take Devilfish, but that's not the case any longer. And for the most part, I wouldn't bother taking Pathfinders and a Devilfish anyway. There's no real reason to put Pathfinders in a Devilfish, especially because they have a scout move that allows them to reposition early on in the game. So you can pretty much get Pathfinders to a place where you want them to be right off the bat, whether that's taking up an advantageous position in ruins, which is strongly recommended for these guys considering their low armor save, or securing an objective, something like that early on, and avoiding competition with other enemy units. So transport's really not necessary for these guys, considering that extra move and the fact that their primary weapons are all range 30 at least. So you're all set. That leaves a question then of how many should you bring and where should you put them? Well, I would say bring at least 2 units of Pathfinders in most 2,000 point armies. You can fill in a third Markerlight source with drones or something else, but having at least 2 units of Pathfinders seems like a good idea to me. Those are going to be pretty small units, 5 to 7. I wouldn't really invest anything more than 7 just because it's nice to have your Markerlight sources broken up across the battlefield. And the reason for that is you don't want all your Markerlight sources in one spot so that they get charged and die. Especially considering the high mobility of units in 8th edition, you want your Markerlights to be spread out across your deployment zone. So having them on opposite sides of your deployment zone is probably a pretty good idea in order to minimize your losses due to shooting or charging. So multiple small units of Pathfinders is really the way to go. If you do decide to go with the special weapons, which again I think most of the time is going to be not a great option, but if you do decide to go that way, add 3 to that list, because you still want those marker lights. Don't take a 5-man unit with only 2 marker lights in it, because you still need those marker lights. So take a 8-man unit with 5 marker lights and 3 ion rifles or something like that. But don't only go for the special weapons. All right. Yeah, I think that's about it. Overall, I think Pathfinders are better now than they were before. I think you want to have multiple units of them in your army, and like I said, spread them out across your deployment zone, because of the way carbines work with the Cadre Fireblade. If you want to have one of those Pathfinder units in your Fire Warrior gun line, that can be really good. They can benefit from the Cadre Fireblade when firing their carbines to take out chargers in Overwatch, or they can also lend a pulse accelerator drone to the Fire Warriors, which can kind of help give them a little bit more range, although not necessarily critical, but still having that pulse accelerator drone in with a Fire Warrior gunline can help out at least a little bit. So having multiple units of Pathfinders is really a good way to go. I think they're going to be a staple of a lot of Tau armies, at least those that don't rely on multi-trackers or anything like that. Armies that use Pathfinders or use marker lights at all are going to have multiple units of Pathfinders in them. And that's the way that I'm running my army right now, is multiple units of Pathfinders in order to provide consistent, reliable marker light support to the rest of my army. So let me know what you guys think of Pathfinders, of the way marker lights work, anything like that in the comments below. If they're working great for you, if you have completely given up on marker lights and Pathfinders, either way, I'd love to hear it. So thanks for watching, and of course, happy wargaming.